Hello, this is Audrey welcoming you to the 1671st edition of Enfield Talking newspaper, Dateline the 14th of August 2008. The readers this week are Francis and Alan, and we have a visitor this week, Phillip, a new reader. Welcome, Phillip. Hope you enjoy yourself with us. Myself and Dave on the controls. The local stories include pleas for tougher penalties for teens who kill, council not becoming balmy bin bureaucrat, and children turning on their own parents with violence. At the start of Side 2, we will be bringing you special news about Enfield Visions and their Technology Day, as well as their drop-in centre. And so now over to Francis for the first item.
A government department has poured cold water over claims that Enfield residents will be fined for leaving wheelie bin lids open. Earlier in the week, Cabinet Member for Environment, Terry Neville, said the council was considering rolling out wheelie bins to all homes across the borough. However, he said it would not fine people for overfilling them as set out in government guidelines. But a spokesman for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs said that local authorities are not obliged to use them. Mr. Neville said, "These guidelines are completely unreasonable and disproportionate. They are just another example of a balmy bureaucracy that is needlessly criminalising normal, decent and law-abiding citizens." Mr. Neville said the council only uses on-the-spot fines for littering and said if wheelie bins were introduced in the borough, it would not follow the guidelines. As part of our wider waste review, we are considering introducing wheelie bins in Enfield, but we will not go down this overly officious route. We have a zero-tolerance approach towards envirocrime in Enfield and have a very strong record on prosecuting litter louts. But we will not fine people over silly misdemeanours. It's counterproductive in the long run. It turns people off recycling and reducing their waste. But a DEFRA spokeswoman said, local authorities are not obliged by government or the guidance we issue to impose fixed penalties if they do not want to. How they use these powers is entirely a matter for them.
An increasing number of parents are reporting that they are being abused by their own children, according to experts. The Advertiser has learned that more parents are calling for help as some of them are being put in hospital by their own offspring. Paulette Trowers-Howe, Senior Advisor for Enfield's Parent Support Service, said that more parents are asking for help because they are being beaten up by their teenagers rather than because they fear their children are joining gangs. She said, "We've had more parents coming to us saying their children are beating them up. One mother ended up in hospital with a cracked rib cage. The mother was going through some problems and her daughter was trying to get attention, being upset with what the mother was doing to herself." In its first year, the Parent Support Service has helped 830 parents, carers and guardians of under 18s to manage behavioural problems. Police, however, do not record specific cases of children committing domestic abuse against their parents. A police spokeswoman said, "It depends whether victims want to press charges." She added, "It also depends on whether there is sufficient evidence for an arrest. Some young people go to court, and the penalties differ hugely depending upon the offence they are convicted of. At this point, they are probably going to be on an order from the court." Young Minds, a national mental health charity for under 25s, receives calls about physically abusive children. Claire Usiskin, Policy and Communications Officer for the charity's helpline, said, "We try to empower parents. A parent has to feel comfortable in their own home. A significant number of parents have mental problems themselves, and communication is a problem in teenagers. Parents can get help from Enfield's Parent Support Service by calling 020 8372 1500. That's 020 8372 1500.
More than 1,000 Edmonton residents have demanded that the government imposes tougher penalties on those caught with weapons. Last Friday, Andy Love, MP for Edmonton, handed in a petition to 10 Downing Street on the eve of the conclusion of the trial of a teenage killer from the area. On Monday, Kevin Lewis, 18, of Culpeper Close, Edmonton, was found guilty of manslaughter after stabbing Louis Boduca, 18, of Roman Way, Bush Hill Park, on January the 21st. Mr. Boduca's father, Frank Mudianga, was joined by Nani Nemezu, father of Laiki, 16, who died 2 weeks after being attacked with a brick in Hartford Road in February. Mr. Love collected more than 1,000 signatures and letters from his constituents demanding more action from the government to cut the number of knives and guns on the street. Speaking after handing in the petition, he said, "The people of Edmonton are saying that enough is enough. This petition is to show the Prime Minister and government that they want action. Parents are very concerned about the continuing level of violence. They want to be assured that when young people carry a knife, stringent and robust action is taken." Obviously, these events have had a dramatic impact on the families concerned, but this is unprecedented for an area like Edmonton. Last year and the year before, there were no stabbings like this, and this year there have been 6. You can imagine the anguish this has caused. There's a responsibility on all families to ensure their children are not carrying knives. These fathers are getting involved and want to do something to ensure that what has happened to them will not happen to others. Mr. Love added, parents are saying they won't let their children out because they're afraid they won't come home. Mr. Mudianga spoke of his wish for a monument to be erected near the site of his son's stabbing, to remind other youngsters about the effects of violent gang crimes. Like his father, Mr. Nemezu also spoke of how he thinks the problem could be solved. He said, "I can recall just 10 to 15 years ago, Edmonton was a beautiful area to live in. But over the last year or two, we are hearing about the stabbings in our streets. I believe it goes back to children having problems in school, being expelled and left to hang around on the streets and form gangs. The government should find a way of looking after those youngsters expelled from school." Mr. Namizu is hoping to work with Kingsmead School in Southby Road, where Laiki was studying for his GCSEs, to set up a charity for children who are expelled from school. He added, "The majority of the youngsters doing this are black. The majority of those expelled from schools are black. Schools need to work at understanding their culture rather than expelling them. Also, the youth don't have respect for the police. We need some kind of education scheme, too, in primary and secondary schools about how the authorities should be respected." Upper Edmonton councillor Kate Anolu joined the MP and fathers outside number 10. She said, "As a mother, my heart bleeds every day that this is happening. When you have brought up your kids, you expect them to look after you when you're older. Children should bury their parents, and parents need to know who their children's friends are."
Exterminators have been called in by the trust which runs Chase Farm Hospital more than 200 times in the past 2 years. It was revealed in a Freedom of Information request submitted by the Conservative Party that pest controllers were called in to tackle rats and other vermin for the Barnet and Chase Farm Hospital's NHS Trust 207 times in a 27-month period ending in April this year. Some 70% of hospital trusts which responded to the request brought in exterminators up to 1,000 times. 80% of trusts had problems with ants, 66% with rats, 77% with mice, 59% with cockroaches, and 6% with maggots. A Barnet and Chase Farm spokeswoman said, "Cleanliness of our hospitals and patient safety are key priorities for this trust. We have a rigorous and proactive pest control regime in place to handle any possible vermin or pest infestation. Rent-to-kill surveys our sites weekly to assess risk and take appropriate preventative action. There are also 6 monthly checks, ad hoc night inspections, and an immediate call-out system. If there's a need for remedial action, Rentokil is called to the site straight away. Averil Dongworth, Chief Executive of the hospital, added, "We take any report or sightings of vermin or pests very seriously and will take all steps to eradicate them. It is a credit to our estates team and contractors that we are able to deal with pest control in a speedy and efficient manner, given we cover 2 major hospitals with multiple buildings." North Middlesex University Hospital in Stirling Way, Edmonton, called out pest control 45 times in the same period.
A man was taken to hospital on Sunday evening after being held up in his store by 2 armed robbers. The worker had stopped to shop in Chaseville Parade, Chaseville Park Road, Winchmore Hill, faced a man armed with a gun and another with a knife at 10 p.m. The pair escaped with some cash from the store. The worker was taken to Chase Farm Hospital in the Ridgeway, Enfield, with hand injuries. Enfield Southgate MP David Burrows has his constituency office on the same parade. He says he is renewing calls on Enfield Council to install CCTV cameras on the parade, which has been prone to antisocial behaviour. One shop worker said, "It's ludicrous the amount of crime that happens in these shops. David Burrows' office is on this parade. It should be one of the safest areas, but it's not. We have young people outside begging and people smoking drugs which wafts into the shops." The shop was closed on Monday, and it's like a ghost town round here. Without that shop, the whole place is dead. We've been asking for CCTV and alley gates, but Mr. Burrows keeps suggesting we pay for it ourselves. Mr. Burrows added, "It was an appalling and brutal attack on the shop, one that's a real concern, particularly for the businesses with evening trade. Apparently there were elements of torture. I've said that there needs to be patrols along the parade in the evenings and previously called for CCTV coverage because there's been a fair amount of antisocial behaviour. In the recent months, there's been an increase in youths causing problems along the parade. There was an armed robbery in the bookies last year." An Enfield Council spokesman said, "We're planning to install CCTV on 10 more sites in the borough during the next 18 months. This will include areas in Winchmore Hill, Edmonton and Enfield Lock. The armed robbery is being investigated by officers from the flying squad."
Tube stations in Enfield will be manned by new policing teams in a bid to cut crime. Mayor of London Boris Johnson announced 30 new teams which will be stationed at tube stations across London at a launch event in Finsbury Park. The team in Enfield will police the borough's 4 tube stations, Oakwood, Cockfosters, Southgate and Arnos Grove, as well as other stations on the Piccadilly line. Speaking at the event, Mr. Johnson said, "The announcement of 30 dedicated policing teams will make the tube a safer environment for passengers and staff. It is vital Londoners can travel safely around the city, reassured by a visible police presence." Led by a sergeant, the teams will consist of 4 police constables and 2 community support officers, supported by 24-hour response teams, and are being put in place across the entire London Underground and Docklands Light Railway. The team will work with British Transport Police, Underground staff and Met Police, conducting regular patrols of the Piccadilly line, running operations and holding public meetings with people in the area to identify local needs and priorities.
7 paramedics from Enfield are embarking on a 7-day trek across the Sahara Desert. The group are hoping to raise more than £10,000 for the British Heart Foundation and Marie Curie. The group of 6 paramedics and technicians from the ambulance station next to Chase Farm Hospital in the Ridgeway, Enfield, and 1 member from the Edmonton ambulance station will be holding a series of fundraisers to fund the trip, which will cost £2,250 each. Next March, the group will walk 9 miles a day in temperatures above 30 degrees centigrade. The group will take part in a 16-week course before travelling to Morocco next year. Paramedic Chris Thomas, 43, drives a fast response car from the Chase Farm station. He said, "We thought we would like to do something different. One of the ladies had just turned 40 and felt she hadn't done anything good. She wanted to give something back. We wanted to do something that would push us. We deal with a lot of people with heart problems and suffering from cancer. We also have family members who've been affected by these illnesses. My dad and his brothers died of heart attacks. On September the 12th, the team are holding a quiz night at the Old Grammarians Rugby Club in World's End Lane, Winchmore Hill. On October the 30th, they're also holding a masked Halloween ball in the Theobald's Park in Lieutenant Ellis Way, Cheshunt. As well as financial donations, sponsorship, the team are also asking for the prize donations, which can be auctioned off during the ball. For more information about the trek, visit www.justgiving.com/laststrekkers.
A pensioner had cash and jewellery stolen after she was tricked into inviting two crooks into her home. The 89-year-old of Eversley Park Road, Winchmore Hill, fell victim to a distraction burglary scam when two young men arrived on her doorstep claiming to be water board officials investigating reports of a leak. The unsuspecting senior citizen allowed the pair into her home and then left them alone in the kitchen to do their work. Instead, they raided drawers and rifled through her possessions while she sat in the lounge, ignorant of what was actually happening. The victim only discovered she had been duped after the men had left the property. Police are hunting two white men who are both approximately 20 years old, both have short hair, and one has an Irish accent. Anyone with any information should call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800... Sorry, I'm always bad with figures. 0800 555 111. Police are urging residents to insist that cold callers produce identification before letting them into their home.
A pioneering day centre for the elderly, once labelled a legacy for the borough by the council leader, has launched a fight to stay open after the authority said funding it was no longer sustainable. The Ruth Winston Centre has over 600 members and provides social activities for the over 50s. Now staff there have stepped up their fundraising and will have to investigate external sources of funding because all the current funds will be withdrawn after April 2009. Senior council officers met with trustees of the centre on Monday and are now giving staff advice about how external funding can be sourced and which grants could be made available. Centre manager Michelle Day said, "We're just raising little bits of money to help keep going. It's worrying. March is not too far away, and we need to act now. The council is going to support us and has already started. I'm very positive about that, but external funding is often for one-off projects, and we need funding just to keep the centre going." The centre has had its funding slashed in half this year, receiving a cut of £60,000. Its current grant will be spent entirely on staff salaries, and it will now have to meet its other bills from fundraising. Chris Rash, chairman of the Board of Trustees, said the centre was unprepared for the cuts, saying he didn't know that the money lost would be so great a proportion of the centre's total budget. The centre was founded in 1961 as the first of its kind by the former mayor of Southgate, who left the building in Green Lanes to the council in perpetuity to provide services to older people in the borough. When the founder, Ruth Winston, died last year, council leader and trustee of the centre, Michael Rye, called the concept her legacy and said it represented a lasting tribute to her commitment to developing services for older people. However, after the centre became an activity and resource centre in 2006, the council decided that funding would have to be sought externally because such services, which help to keep people active and prevent them becoming depressed, do not have to be provided by law. Members have expressed their dismay at the threat to the centre. Richard Taylor, 76, who takes part in the country dancing classes there, said, "A lot of older people get depressed and they need somewhere to go. It would really affect a lot of our members if we were forced to close." Member Anne Glass, aged 58, said, "The Ruth Winston Centre has changed my life. It has given me the encouragement to go out and do different things."
A Cheshunt pub is holding a bank holiday fundraiser for a 6-year-old with severe epilepsy. Maya Campbell of Elgin Road, Cheshunt, suffers from the potentially fatal severe myoclonic epilepsy of infancy and global development delay, which causes her to have up to 16 seizures a day. In June, the Advertiser reported on Maya's parents' hope to build a soft playroom and downstairs bedroom for their eldest daughter. Keith Buckle, landlord of the Green Dragon pub in Churchgate, Cheshunt, read about the family and had been planning a charity day for the August bank holiday. When he met Maya's mum, Tracy Waugh, he decided to support the local family. He said, "We have always been involved with local charities rather than national ones. We are planning a day of children's games, which we hope Maya will be able to join in." The event starts at midday on August 25th with a barbecue. Throughout the day there will be face painting, egg and spoon and three-legged races, and a set of stocks. Mr. Buckle added, "The main attraction will be the horse race. We are using space hoppers, and we are going to have adult jockeys and some betting on them to raise more money." The family needs to raise another £18,000 to adapt their home for Maya's needs. Tracy said, "At the moment, she's having a fit every day. It can't be controlled by her medicine. We've had an occupational therapist round who thinks the soft playroom is a great idea. She looks a picture of health. People don't realise how severe her illness is. She could die any day. We take each day as it comes. The happier she is, the happier we are." Miss Waugh is inviting local celebrities and plans to hold an auction with prizes, including signed memorabilia from the Beckhams.
Vida Jamal and Mehmet Kartal took their families on an £11,500 five-star trip to Turkey, but they say the trip turned out to be a holiday from hell. Mr. Jamal of Ridge Avenue and Mr. Kartal of Green Dragon Lane, both in Enfield, sued travel agents CTA Holidays Limited and tour operators Capri Star Limited, trading as Happy Days Holidays and Tours, claiming promises regarding their accommodation weren't kept. They claimed they were given fewer rooms than they had paid for, were not given communicating rooms where parents and children could sleep, and that the group was widely scattered around the hotel complex when they had been told they would be accommodated close together. The two men claimed £25,000, comprising reimbursement of the full cost of their holidays plus damages for disappointment and inconvenience. But on March the 20th, at Inner London County Court, a judge found against them and dismissed their claim. Last week, top judge Lord Justice Stanley Burnton, sitting at London Civil Appeal Court, granted them permission to appeal against part of the county court judge's decision, but said the case should never have reached trial, let alone the Court of Appeal. The cost of the holiday was less than £12,000. This is a case which should never ever have got anywhere near trial, and it's a great shame that I have to deal with it, he said. And he asked the pair, "You risk something like £70,000, £60,000 or even £50,000 in costs over a holiday which only cost £11,500. Does that seem very sensible to you?" Lord Justice Burnton granted the men permission to appeal against the dismissal of their claim against CTA Holidays only, but added that even if they win their appeal, they could end up tens of thousands of pounds out of pocket because of legal bills. He told the court, "I'm persuaded that there is an arguable appeal against the first defendant, but I'm far from convinced that the liability of the first defendant could be for the cost of the entire holiday plus damages. The result of this case may well be a Pyrrhic victory, even if the appeal succeeds, because of the costs involved." Lord Justice Burnton concluded by urging the parties to settle the dispute without the need for any further court hearings and still more costs being run up. If no settlement is reached, the case will return to the appeal court for a full hearing on a date which is yet to be fixed.
A disabled man and his wife were rescued as fire engulfed their home in the middle of the night. The fire in Cameron Close, Upper Edmonton, broke out around 12 a.m. on Tuesday, August the 5th. Fire crews from Edmonton, Tottenham and Walthamstow fire stations were all called to the incident. The blaze severely damaged the first floor flat, but the fire crew's valiant efforts meant that it did not spread to adjacent properties. The fire was brought under control after an hour, after being fought by 4 fire engines and around 20 firefighters. The couple who were living in the flat were rescued by the firefighters and brought to safety wearing breathing apparatus. A further 50 people from the surrounding flats had to be evacuated from the building due to the heavy smoke which was thick throughout the building. The cause of the fire is still under investigation, and the couple has been rehoused by the council until it is safe for them to go back to their home.
A man from Enfield has been jailed for his part in the murder of 3 drug dealers in Bishop Stortford last August. Yile Tufansoy, aged 21, of Nags Head Road, Enfield, was found guilty of helping 2 offenders escape the country at St Albans Crown Court on Monday, and was given a 4-year sentence alongside 4 other men. Brothers Miran and Kovan Thakrar, aged 24 and 21, were found guilty of 3 counts of murder, 2 attempted murder, and firearms offences. Atul Thakrar, aged 47, and Amanda Dancy, aged 21, were also both found guilty of assisting an offender. On August the 28th, the Thakrars met Keith Cowell, aged 52, 17-year-old Matthew Cowell, aged 17, and Tony Dulieu, aged 33, and their supplier Ian Jennings, aged 54, at Plawhatch Close in Bishop Stortford, about a previous cocaine deal. Miran shot the family dog, Gorgeous, then the Cowells and Mr. Dulieu, while his brother looked on. Ian Jennings escaped and hid behind a garden shed. The men then also shot and stabbed Christine Jennings, aged 54, Mr. Jennings' mother, and attacked Claire Evans, aged 23, Matthew Cowell's girlfriend, with a knife as she tried to shield her 3-year-old daughter. Detective Chief Inspector Mick Hanlon from the Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit said 3 men lost their lives and 2 women were seriously injured in a horrific, targeted crime, and I want to extend my sincere sympathy to their families. While we know that the background to these crimes was based in drug dealing, the response of shooting 3 men dead and attempting to murder 2 women is completely disproportionate. The jury spent 60 hours and 23 minutes considering their verdicts. J. Thakrar, aged 25, from Stevenage, was found not guilty of assisting an offender. Miran Thakrar was sentenced to a minimum of 42 years in prison. His brother is still awaiting sentence. Atul Thakrar and Amanda Dancy were both handed down 4-year sentences.
An Enfield man was arrested following an incident in which a taxi driver suffered head injuries. The 22-year-old was one of 3 men arrested and later released on police bail after the incident at Waltham Abbey. Police were called to Round Hills in Waltham Abbey at about 9:25 p.m. on Friday, following a report that a taxi driver in a black VW Passat car had received head wounds after being assaulted. They arrested 2 men in Round Hills and another in Rochford Avenue. The injured man was taken to hospital by ambulance, having suffered 3 puncture wounds to the head. A police spokesman said they were not knife wounds. The 22-year-old from Enfield and a 24-year-old East London man were arrested on suspicion of grievous bodily harm, while a 34-year-old Harlow man was arrested on suspicion of causing actual bodily harm. All 3 were released on police bail to report back to police on October the 1st.
Middlesex University's annual fun run this year raised over £4,000 for Treehouse, the national charity for autism education. This year's event, which was started by former EastEnders actress Michelle Collins, saw over 300 people taking part in either the 5K run or a more leisurely walk. Mel Parker, Head of Sport and Recreation at Middlesex University, presented the cheque for £4,162 to Treehouse last week. Treehouse was founded in 1997 and aims to transform the lives of children and families living with autism. The organisation runs a school for children with autism in North London and campaigns nationally to improve autism education for all. We have reached the end of side 1 for this tape. Please stop your machine now, take out the cassette, turn it over and start side 2.